Google. In late 2018, the company whose motto was "Don't be evil" launched a secret campaign called Project Vivian. The goal, per internal documents, was to convince employees that unions suck. Their words. But the campaign wasn't the real scandal. It was what the consultants were tracking. Google hired IRI consultants, and they didn't just monitor organizing. They built profiles on workers, tracking finances, work stances, and ethnicity to find wedge points that could fracture solidarity. Project Vivian sounds like a software product. It was actually a covert HR and legal campaign, not a tool. Google's director of employment law, Michael Phil, oversaw the effort. The company built a calendar tool that flagged meetings of more than 100 people and alerted management. Google's attorneys requested anonymous anti-union op-eds placed in media outlets with explicit instructions to leave no fingerprints. They put that in writing, in documents that got subpoenaed. By January 2021, the Alphabet Workers Union formed partly in response. A year later, an administrative law judge ordered the release of roughly 180 internal Project Vivian documents. The company running public diversity initiatives hired consultants who sorted employees by race to kill organizing. The documents Google tried to keep sealed are now public record, everyone stamped with Google's logo. WorkComposer, 21 million screenshots. That's how many a Bossware company called WorkComposer left sitting in an unsecured Amazon S3 bucket, accessible to anyone who found the URL. Screenshots potentially containing passwords, API keys, internal communications, and confidential documents. The surveillance tool designed to catch insider threats had become the insider threat. WorkComposer serves over 200,000 employees across its client base. The software captures a screenshot every 20 seconds, logs keystrokes, and tracks application usage. In February 2025, Cybernews researchers discovered the open bucket and notified WorkComposer on February 21st. The company's CERT team was contacted March 19th after a slow response. The bucket wasn't secured until April 1st, 2025, over 5 weeks exposed. One screenshot every 20 seconds. That's 180 per hour per employee. Across 200,000 workers, that's 36 million screenshots per day. They left 21 million of them in an open folder on the internet. The entire product exists to make sure employees don't leak sensitive data. The company leaked all of it. 5 weeks to close a bucket after being told it was open. The screenshots are gone now. Probably. WorkComposer hasn't confirmed whether anyone else downloaded them first. H&M, 35.3 million euros. That was the fine. The largest employee surveillance penalty in German GDPR history, and it started with something called a welcome back talk. Since 2014, team leaders at H&M's Nuremberg Service Center had been conducting these chats with employees returning from sick leave or vacation. Sounds like a wellness program. It was an intelligence gathering operation dressed up as concern, but it only came out because someone misconfigured a server. Managers secretly recorded employees' health diagnoses, family problems, and religious beliefs, then logged everything into a database accessible to 50 managers. That data informed employment decisions for 5 years. In October 2019, a routine IT error made the files visible company-wide for several hours. A speeding ticket in Germany costs maybe 100 euros. A serious GDPR violation for a small company, maybe 50,000. H&M paid 35.3 million, enough to buy every employee in that service center a new car. The people who used IT systems to monitor others got exposed by the exact kind of IT mistake they feared employees might cause. The database was active for 5 years. The IT error that exposed it lasted a few hours. Intermex. In February 2014, Myrna Arias was hired as a regional sales executive at Intermex, a money transfer company. She was required to install an app called Xora on her personal phone. It tracked her location around the clock, evenings, weekends, personal time. Her manager knew how fast she was driving during her off hours, and he bragged about it directly to her face. That brag became the centerpiece of a lawsuit. Manager John Stubitz openly told Arias he could see her driving speed on personal time, apparently thinking this was impressive rather than incriminating. When Arias objected and uninstalled the app in April 2014, she was fired shortly after. This case gets dismissed as old news, something from the early smartphone era. It's not. It remains the defining legal precedent for off-duty GPS monitoring of employees in the United States, still referenced in current legislation over a decade later. In May 2015, Arias filed suit in Kern County, California. The case settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. A money transfer company that handles sensitive financial data across borders couldn't handle one employee saying no. The case settled. The app didn't survive the lawsuit, but the legal precedent did. Wells Fargo. In May 2024, Wells Fargo's Wealth and Investment Management Unit fired over a dozen employees for using mouse jigglers, $20 USB devices that simulate cursor movement during remote work. The bank that built a $3 billion scandal on faking things fired people for faking things. But the real damage wasn't the termination. It was what came after. Wells Fargo mandated hybrid return to office in 2022 and monitored remote workers with activity tracking software, measuring mouse movement and keystrokes. When the jigglers were detected, terminations came fast. By June 2024, FINRA disclosures had been filed, Series 7 and 65 registrations revoked. Most reports say mouse jigglers, but the FINRA filings actually reference simulation of keyboard activity, meaning some employees may have used software, not physical devices. Either way, the result was identical. A mouse jiggler costs $20. A keyboard simulator, about $60. The FINRA disclosure that ends your career in finance is permanent. The same bank that paid over $3 billion in penalties after employees created millions of unauthorized customer accounts, a fraud operation driven by impossible sales targets, fired workers for simulating mouse movement. The employees lost their licenses. Wells Fargo kept theirs. Every one of these companies had an employee handbook. Every handbook had a section on trust. If you want to see how the rest of them handled it, hit subscribe. Thanks. Walmart. In 2021, Walmart settled a class action for $10 million after collecting palm vein biometric data from 21,677 employees without written consent. The world's largest private employer apparently didn't know about a law that had been on the books for over a decade. But the real absurdity isn't the violation, it's what compliance would have cost. Walmart deployed palm scanners in Illinois locations for clocking in and out. The Illinois Biometric Information Privacy Act, effective since 2008, requires a signed consent form before biometric collection. A ream of paper costs about $10. Printing 21,677 consent forms would have run maybe $200. Not printing them cost $10 million. The palm scanner case often gets conflated with separate, ongoing litigation over customer facial recognition via Clearview AI, but they're distinct. The employee biometrics case is settled. The customer case isn't. A 2008 law still catching one of the world's biggest retailers off guard over a decade later. That facial recognition lawsuit is pending, with potential statutory damages of $1,000 to $5,000 per violation. The potential damages there make $10 million look like a rounding error. Teleperformance. In March 2021, call center giant Teleperformance sent an 8-page contract addendum to 95% of its 39,000 Colombian remote employees. It required consent to AI-powered webcams in their homes, voice analytics, biometric data collection, and surveillance of family members, including children under 18 who might appear on camera. The company was handling customer service for Apple, whose entire brand is built on privacy. Workers were told the surveillance was required by the clients, meaning Apple. The TP Observer system sent real-time alerts when unauthorized objects like phones or paper appeared in the frame. Colombia wasn't the only market. The system deployed across 19 countries through TP Cloud Campus, potentially monitoring 240,000 of the company's 380,000 global employees. That's roughly the population of a mid-sized city, all on camera in their own homes. Apple denied requesting home cameras, calling it the contractor system, not a client mandate. Contract addendum is a very corporate way to describe an 8-page surveillance consent form covering your children. In August 2021, NBC News broke the story. Albania's Data Protection Authority issued a prohibition order in January 2022. Albania banned it. The other 18 countries where it was deployed didn't. Apple. In December 2024, Apple employee Amar Bakhta filed a class action in California State Court alleging the company requires surveillance software on employees' personal devices, giving Apple access to their emails, photos, health data, and smart home data. Not a contractor's system, not an outsourcer's policy, Apple's own, applied to Apple's own people. But the allegations go beyond device monitoring. Apple reportedly requires employees to use personal iCloud accounts for work. Once MDM software is installed, Apple's internal policy allegedly states that any data on the device is subject to search. That's a very Apple way to describe scanning your employees' vacation photos. The company's policy reportedly defines company premises to include home offices, enabling physical, video, and electronic surveillance. Bakhta, employed since 2020 in digital advertising, also alleges Apple bars workers from discussing pay and conditions, even on personal social media. His attorneys, Chris Baker and Jahan Sagafi, filed it as a class action with potential exposure in tens of millions. Apple requires personal iCloud for work, then reportedly claims the right to search it. The lawsuit is pending. Apple's privacy page is still up. Amazon. In December 2023, France's CNIL fined Amazon France Logistique 32 million euros for warehouse surveillance that classified bathroom breaks as idle time and measured workers at 1.25 seconds per item. The system had a metric called stow machine gun. Amazon argued in court that tracking it was perfectly legal. 1.25 seconds per item. That's less time than it takes to read this sentence. Multiply that across thousands of workers, 8 hours a day, and you get a system measuring human beings in fractions of a second. Workers carried handheld scanners, generating real-time metrics for every task and every pause. Video surveillance ran on shared, weak passwords across accounts. The fine is widely reported as 32 million euros, but that number changed. Amazon appealed, and in December 2025, France's Council of State cut it to 15 million. The court ruled that speed tracking was legal under GDPR's legitimate interest provision. Only keeping the data for 31 days was deemed excessive. The productivity surveillance itself was lawful. Just don't save the receipts too long. The scanners are still in use. The appeals court confirmed that's legal. The only thing Amazon had to change was how long they kept the data. IKEA France. 1 million euros in corporate fines. But the real number was the prison sentence. In June 2021, a Versailles court found IKEA France's former CEO, Jean-Louis Bayot, guilty and handed him a 2-year suspended sentence for running a criminal espionage operation against his own employees. One worker was flagged because his manager wanted to know how he could afford a BMW convertible. Between 2009 and 2012, IKEA France paid a private security firm called Airpace up to 600,000 euros per year for background checks on employees, job applicants, union representatives, and even customers. A Billy bookcase cost about 40 euros. 600,000 a year on investigators buys 15,000 Billy bookcases, enough to fill a warehouse with furniture instead of surveillance files. Airpace bribed 4 police officers to pull records from France's confidential criminal database. Risk manager Jean-François Paris sent lists of names to be tested. Targets included union activists, employees with unexplained income, and workers who'd suddenly become protesters. The CEO didn't serve time. The sentence was suspended, and the conviction hit IKEA's French subsidiary, not the Swedish parent. But the company, built on democratic, egalitarian Scandinavian values, bribed police to investigate a worker who bought a nice car. The CEO's sentence was suspended. The police officer's convictions weren't. The employee kept the BMW. If you want to see more stories like these, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching.